This fight is going to be a banger. Alexander Volkanovski is back at UFC 315 against up-and-comer Diego Lopes, with the featherweight title getting vacated by Ilia Topuria. But this is why Volk versus Lopes will not end well.
Alexander Volkanovski is finally back after his bad defeat, losing his featherweight belt against Ilia Topuria, in which now he's on a 2-fight skid against both very high-level guys in Islam Makhachev and Ilia. But it is 2 KO defeats regardless, one with a head kick and one getting knocked out through punches. So those are definitely very devastating losses, and it's going to be interesting to see if Volkanovski can make a return, as he currently is 36 years old and Diego Lopes, the hungry younger guy in the UFC, on a good win streak, trying to get his first hands on the belt. So it's definitely not going to be a walk in the park for the former #1 pound for pound fighter, but it's going to be huge for him if he can finally get back into the win column.
Yeah, Diego Lopes, the younger guy at 30 years old, his last loss in the UFC was to Movsar Evloev, who also could warrant a title shot, but hasn't been the most exciting as of late. And Diego Lopes had 3 back-to-back first-round finishes since that fight. He's been more active, and like you said, Volk was on the top of this division for so long, and I feel like stylistically this actually isn't a terrible matchup for him. Yes, Diego is dangerous, but compared to someone like Ilia Topuria, who kind of just shut his lights out in 2 rounds, did the same to Max Holloway, like, it's really going to be hard to beat Ilia because Volk probably isn't going to catch him and he's probably not going to outpoint him. But in terms of Diego Lopes, yes, he is dangerous early, has some first round finishes, but in his last 2 fights against Brian Ortega and Dan Ige, he went the distance and he looked to have slowed down a little bit in that, especially Dan Ige fight. That fight was on very short notice and he wasn't preparing for Ige, he was preparing for Ortega, but regardless, he didn't look that sharp going into those later rounds, and that's really where Volkanovski can thrive if it gets there. We know in those championship rounds how dangerous and how skilled Alexander Volkanovski can be. We saw it in that second fight against Max Holloway. He was down 2 rounds, won the last 3, even though that was a controversial decision. Some people thought the 3rd round could have went either way. So the later this fight goes, I feel like Volkanovski definitely can drown Lopes into those deeper waters, which is definitely a way he can win this fight.
For sure, like you said, he has all the championship experience, fighting the who's who of the featherweight division, and as well going up in his first fight against Islam Makhachev for a very competitive fight in which he showed how well-rounded, and that's going to be one of the biggest attributes here against Diego Lopes. Volkanovski is just so well-rounded in his MMA game. His striking is good, mixing it up with kicks, trying to keep his distance even though he's a small guy. He has good distance management, and he mixes it beautifully with his takedowns, his wrestling, and his grappling ability. He's able to grapple with some of the best out there. We saw, like in that Islam fight again, how talented of a wrestler he really is. And he was able to showcase that in other title fights too, like against Brian Ortega with the ground and pound, as well Yair Rodriguez taking him down after hurting him to finish him again with ground and pound. So definitely can't count Volkanovski out no matter what, even if he's coming off 2 losses. Diego Lopes, on the other hand, is the bigger guy. He does have decent striking, but he's also very dangerous on the ground with his submission threats. And we've seen Volkanovski before get caught in a guillotine from Brian Ortega, who as well is a very talented grappler, jiu-jitsu practitioner. So it's very possible Diego Lopes could get Volkanovski caught in something if they are having a lot of scrambles, exchanges on the ground. But as well, Volkanovski on the feet at least has good experiences facing against bigger guys than him, like Max Holloway, being able to outstrike him. So I think for Volkanovski, the biggest factor in this fight to come back and win the belt again is going to be if he's able to mix it up well.
Yeah, if you look at Diego Lopes' record, he actually has more submission wins than he does have knockout wins. Now, he only has 1 submission win in the UFC via triangle armbar, but he definitely still is dangerous on the ground. I just don't see him catching Volkanovski with his submission. So if anything, I feel like Lopes is going to be more dangerous on the feet with the strikes we saw in Volk's last 2 fights. Him getting caught on the feet, so he may be susceptible to the fast hands of Diego. We saw how quickly Diego Lopes rocked Brian Ortega in that fight. He basically knocked him out and then woke him up with the next strike, and that was like pretty much like 30 seconds into that fight. He has dangerous hands. Brian Ortega does have a chin on him though, and that fight didn't end up going the decision, but pretty much a masterclass from Diego Lopes, showing that he does belong at the top of this division. That's why he's earned a title shot now against Volk, but I do not see this fight going the distance. this. Diego Lopes is going to be dangerous early and definitely has a threat of stopping Volkanovski, but if he doesn't, I feel like Volk might be able to drown him and maybe stop Diego later on this fight goes, and to drag him into those deeper waters, pour on the pressure, pour on the pace, and show why he is one of, if not the greatest featherweight of all time. Yes, Volk is older now. Yes, he's on a 2-fight skid, but just a couple years ago, he was going toe-to-toe with the pound-for-pound king in Islam Makhachev. So we know he has the skills. He put a clinic on straight after that fight against Yair Rodriguez, taking him down, mauling him with the ground and pound, stopping him. And honestly, if Diego can get dragged into those deeper waters, Volk could do the same to him.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like you're saying, this one is not going the distance. One of these guys is gonna get stopped for sure. Both of these guys are finishers in their own right. Volkanovski has finished some decent high-level guys in his career, and Diego Lopes has only gone to decision 4 times in all of his 26 MMA wins. And recently, sure, he has gone to decision in his last 2 fights, but those were 3-rounders, and we did see him slow down towards the end of those 3 rounds. So for a 5-round fight, that's definitely going to be very dangerous against a guy so experienced in Volkanovski. So I think it's definitely very possible either Volk is able to wear down Lopes and then gets him tired enough to start beating down on him like he did Yair Rodriguez or someone like that, or Lopes is able to catch Volkanovski in something. Maybe it'll be a submission, maybe not, maybe it'll be strikes, and Volk's chin has deteriorated as well. So I think it's a very high probability this one ends in a finish here.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see the contrast in both of their mindsets. Volkanovski already having done it all pretty much. He was at the top of the division for so long. He challenged for the lightweight title. That's how dominant he was at featherweight. And now looking to come back, he's going to be hungry to redeem himself, get this title back, prove that he still got it. But he is 36 years old. Maybe his age is really starting to catch up to him. He did look decent in that Topuria fight, but it was only for so long, only about 1.5 rounds until he got stopped. So honestly, as much as it sucks to say, this is kind of make or break for Volk. He's now on a 2-fight losing streak. Yes, it is to the lightweight champion and former featherweight champion, but if he loses to Diego Lopes, an up-and-comer, and there's also some other hungry guys coming up in the division, I feel like this may be the end of the road for Volk in terms of having a title. I don't think if he loses to Diego Lopes, he's going to be a champion again. He is already getting up there in age, as we've mentioned, and this is really make or break for him. The pressure really is on Volk as kind of his last chance at this title run. Most people want to see him go on one last run. It's definitely possible, but for Diego Lopes, if he loses this fight, for example, it's not the end of the road for him by any means. He is still young in the division. He can still work his way back up, and Volk isn't going to be at the top forever. For example, guys like Max Holloway, Ilia Topuria are moving up in weight. So regardless of the outcome of this fight, Diego Lopes still has a bright future in the UFC. For Volkanovski, he's more at the end of the road. So this is a must win for Volk. In front of him is going to be a hungry guy in Diego Lopes who's never held that gold. He's never been a world champion. He doesn't know what it's like to be a world champion. So he's going to be hungry to get that title and to get this win. It's the most important fight of his career. So both guys coming in with different mindsets, but both guys going to be hungry to get this win. It's going to be definitely a great fight. I feel like this is going to be a banger. Someone's getting stopped, and I feel like Diego Lopes, the earlier it is, could favor him. But if Volk starts to settle in and drown Diego, it could be his way as well.
But let us know down below who you think is going to win this upcoming title fight. And if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and as well click the video on the screen of how Ilia Topuria speedran the UFC.